Good evening, lovely spirits. It's the wise servant here, Mr. Solace. I greet in the sign of the rising sun, peace and wisdom. Now today I want to do this very important video for you guys. Breaking down Revelations chapter 21, verse 9 and 10. And so the name of this video is going to be, Who is the Lamb's Bride? And so we're going to be reading from that verse in the Bible. Now, I'm not a Christian, and I'm sure many of you are wondering, if you're not a Christian, why do you keep teaching the Bible? And it's only because this book is very important that you understand it in its correct way. Because the religion Christianity is more than just a brainwashing thing. But America is built on that religion, so therefore we actually live Christianity. So you may have left the religion of Christianity and feel like you have embarked on a new journey of knowledge, but you still live Christianity. And so the understandings of this book is very important because the book is separate from the religion. And so it's a very deep thing. And you guys grasping this book the correct way, it can begin to untangle some of your religious beliefs that are keeping you attached to the religion. Knowledge is for all. Religion has nothing to do with wisdom. So the book is a book of wisdom. The religion that attaches itself to it has nothing to do with that. Now, many of you are very, very dependent on your religion emotionally. When I say the religion, I am not speaking of the book. But many of you are very dependent on your religion. And so you will take my words as an attack. But if you can find strength within yourself and a little place of peace, just bear with me, because this is not an attack on the religion as well as the book. But like I said, we live the brainwashing. The system we live in, it's associated with the religion. So they're one and the same. If the words of the religion do not conflict and confound your perspective in brainwashing you, then so the life you live in this system, which is one in the same with the religion, well, that will steer you the wrong way. So they work hand in hand. But in any event, I want to explain to you guys, who is the Lamb's bride? Now, this is very important because in today's times, we assume, the Lamb is Jesus, and we have that whole perspective the way we see it. And we believe that the Lamb's bride, or Jesus' bride, I guess is some woman waiting for him. I'm not sure if many people even are familiar with this text in Revelations, because this is the last chapter of the book. And it's very hard for most to get through the book. But first I want to read the text. Revelations chapter 21, verse 9 through 10. And this will help you guys to grasp who the Lamb is and what that whole thing is. Now I'm going to read verse 9 in chapter 21. It says, Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls filled with the 7 last plagues came to me and talked with me, saying, Come, I will show you the bride of the Lamb's wife. Key word you gotta grasp. Not the Lamb's bride, but the bride. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it says, come, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. Now, before we even get into the understanding of who's the Lamb's wife or the bride is, I want to explain to you guys what the lamb is. And this is very important. The lamb is the thalamus. This is the throne of God. Now, what the thalamus is just a big gulp of gray matter. And this gray matter, it's a big gulp of it. And so, it thins out as it goes down the spinal column. So it's just in the core of the spinal. And, in the outer parts, it's surrounded by cerebral spinal fluid. But the lamb is that thalamus, that gray matter. Now, I know many of you guys will say, I don't see why that's important. Well, why that's important is this. So this would be that bulb of gray matter, the thalamus. And these would be the ventricles, the Ark of the Covenant that houses the Word of God, or the Lamb, which would be the gray matter. Now, the ventricles is just, kind of shoved into the gray matter, kind of dividing it and locking it down from the top and through the middle. And so that's the sacrificial lamb. I don't have a good picture to show you guys of how it would look from the front, but, that would be the lamb. Now, why that's important? Because that's what went into the egg cell from the beginning. So the sperm cell goes into the egg cell. The nucleus in the egg cell and the nucleus in the sperm cell is what becomes one. Those two spirits become one in this body. And so that is the gray matter in its primordial state. And it's a very deep thing I want you guys to grasp. As the body develops, from that egg cell stretching out, becoming a born, living body, well, then it's like this, That egg cell from the beginning is now up above. So everything that was in the beginning when the sperm cell got the egg, all was from the beginning. It was just in its primordial state. The egg cell or the neural tube had not stretched out yet to become the body that we know. And so everything was not in its place yet, but it was in one place. All being in that ovum. That little circle, you can say, that world. And so it's a deep thing I want you guys to grasp. The lamb is basically the spirit that we all are inside this body. And so if you go within your brain, that gray matter being that spirit that we all are from the beginning. And the ventricle system being, the third ventricle, the fourth ventricle, the lateral ventricles that kind of lock it down. This would be the ventricles. I'm sorry, ran out of color. But this would be that what's in that diencephalon area, and it locks down the thalamus, which would be all in this area. And this would be the third ventricle plate, you can say, that goes right between it. So it kind of locks that gray matter into place and, kind of holds it down. That's why they call it the sacrificial lamb. Because, when you ejaculate or orgasm, or if you're a woman, when you have your menstrual cycle, so this is what's kind of being, sacrificed, separated from itself. Now I'm going to read Matthew 27, verse 35, so you can see how I said that ventricle system kind of locks itself into that thalamus and splits it in half. Now let's go to Matthew 27, verse 35. And it says, "Then they crucified him and divided his garments." Let me show y'all that image again, so y'all grasp. It's speaking of that thalamus within the brain. This is that ventricle system. Lateral ventricles, first, second, third ventricle, fourth ventricle. All the way down to the sacral hiatus, which is at the tailbone of the spine. And so that gray matter is here, split in half, all the way down the tailbone. So it's a deep thing, and this is you as the sperm cell inside the egg cell, which is now the body. And so that is the sacrificed lamb. I wish I had a better image for you guys. But actually, if you go to the Noah's Ark video, that image, if you look at it dead on, looks just like a lamb. This is why, this is where that came from. But it says, "Then they crucified him and divided his garments, casting lots that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet. They divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots." Say, what do they mean by cast lots? Third ventricle is a cavity-filled space. Fourth ventricle, cavity-filled space. Lots. All the way down to the sacral hiatus, tailbone end of the spine. And so this is you as a living being in your egg cell or body now. And so this is a very deep thing I want you guys to grasp. Now let's get to the Lamb's bride. What is that? And so let's go to Revelations 21, verse 9 through 10. Let's go to 10. So it says, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife." Now we're at 10. Chapter 21 of Revelations, verse 10. I'm about to break down to you guys who the Lamb's wife is. Now it says, "And he carried me away in the spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me the great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God." Now I want you guys to grasp this because it's very deep. What is this high mountain or the bride's wife? Let's start with the high mountain. It says, "And he carried me away in the spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me the great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God." Now this is supposed to be the Lamb's bride. Now what is this high mountain that it's speaking of? I'm going to use images from my book because that's all I have right now. But this is that high mountain. The uterus. And so it was brought in the spirit. He carried me away in the spirit to the high mountain and showed me the great city, holy city of Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. It is speaking of the egg cell. That is the bride's, or the bride of the Lamb. The egg cell. Now a lot of you guys will say, why is it saying it's descending out of heaven? And why is it calling the egg cell then the holy city of Jerusalem? Because it says, "And he carried me away in the spirit to a great and holy mountain," which I said was the uterus, "and showed me the great city, the holy Jerusalem descending out of heaven from God. Now, I want you guys to grasp. He's speaking as if he's standing on the uterus, the holy mountain, watching the holy city of Jerusalem descend out of heaven to this mountain. And I want you guys to grasp. The reason it's saying or calling the egg cell the holy city of Jerusalem is because, like I said, we are all that lamb, trapped within those ventricles. Now that is that egg cell, you can say, those two nucleus from day one. Now I want you to grasp, when a woman or a girl goes through puberty, her amygdala shrinks. 1/3 of the gray matter in her brain is pruned away or falls away. And this is what casts the first period. And we know the menstrual cycle is the egg cell. And so that's why it says he was sitting on the great mountain, which is the uterus, watching the holy city of Jerusalem descend. Because you have to remember, in the beginning, the egg cell, the lamb's bride, becomes the body. And so now that egg cell, that gray matter, those two nucleuses, is now brought up as the body is developing up to that throne seat, where the ventricles are. And it's a deep thing. So when a woman has her first period, it is that gray matter. Remember, the thalamus is the gray matter. This is you in the spirit, so to say. That's what falls away or is pruned away to become the first period. And so that's why it says that's the holy city descending out of Jerusalem. Because the nucleus of that egg cell, that's the fallen spirit from that gray matter. The nucleus being no different than the gray matter in its primordial state. Now, basically a fallen spirit or angel in an egg cell, a world, a body. And so one falls from the masculine as well, because when a boy goes through puberty, so the same happens to him, except he ejaculates out sperm cell. And so it's the nucleus in the sperm cell and the nucleus in the egg cell that becomes that gray matter, that the living waters, the spirit that you are. The egg cell becomes the body. And so as the egg cell stretches and becomes a body into shape and form, so that thalamus or gray matter is brought up to the brain area of that world or body. And so this is why, it's speaking of the egg cell or the lamb's bride as the holy city of Jerusalem. Because when that body develops now, that egg cell or all that happened in the beginning is now up above. And so when a man ejaculates or a woman has her menstrual, so this is the fall of that, holy city of Jerusalem, where they sacrifice before the altar. So the holy city of Jerusalem is that diencephalon area, you can say. And so, that's where they sacrifice before the throne. And so it's a deep thing I want you guys to grasp. Now, the lamb's bride, why they call that the lamb's bride is because when a man ejaculates, if there's no egg cell there, those sperm cells are done for. And so is the nucleus or the spirit, the gray matter, within that egg cell. So it's almost like the body, or you can say what y'all would call God, when spirits fall, whether they be from the feminine or masculine, egg cells, sperm cells, when they fall, so you can say the life or God provides a world, that being the egg cell that nucleus, that feminine spirit is in. And so the sperm cell joins her in that egg cell, that gift from God, you can say. And so the lamb's bride is the Christ being the body. So it's a deep thing you have to grasp. The lamb would be the fallen spirit. The bride would be, the redeemer of it. Because if there's no egg cell there, then you wouldn't see anyone that you see today. And so we are redeemed by that body, that egg cell, the Lamb's bride. Now it gets deep because all of that gets turned around. And this is how you get the Antichrist. Because in ancient times, this is why they all worship the woman deity or the egg cell deity. Now if you're confused and you're like, I don't remember them worshiping no egg cell deities. Well, that's what this was. Ishtar or Easter. And so in my book I have a chapter explaining Ishtar being, the egg cell deity. And this is why we celebrate Easter's egg. And you paint eggs in Easter, and so you have to grasp this is why, because Lilith or Inanna was the egg cell deity of old. This is why you had all the Inanna temples. Temple meaning body. And so Lilith or Inanna is that feminine spirit, that nucleus within that body or egg cell, that redeemer, that Christ. And so this is how they all understood the wisdom of old. And now how it becomes the Antichrist is when you get to today times. The Christ is no longer the woman and told in that way as the redeemer. But now the bride or that egg cell becomes the harlot of Babylon. So you get my point? And so now the egg cell or that redeemer, the true Christ, is viewed as, the harlot of Babylon that stands over the waters, and it alters the perspective. But this is all speaking, of the body. When I say the body, I mean all bodies are worlds. So we are nothing more than the cells in this body. This is speaking of this body in its embryo state, this body being born out, and now here we are. And so it's a deep thing you have to grasp. Those of old that we call the ancients, like the ancient Sumerians, the ancient Egyptians, these are all civilizations from when this world that we live in, our egg cell, was in its primordial blastocyst embryoblast state. This is before fetus. So all the things you read in the Bible is speaking of that. When you see the pyramids and all these ancient civilizations of stone, this is from when this world or egg cell was in its embryo state. And so now, like all physical things, those bodies, so to say, have fossilized out. So the trees, the mountains, everything you see, so it was living life. These being the giants of old, the bed cells in the primordial state of the embryo, the egg cell, the body. And so now we live in the times where this world is now in shape and form, in body, already born out. And so now, in those times, in its embryo state, the egg cell deity was worshipped, Lilith, the Redeemer. Because that's what redeemed the spirit, the sperm cell, that we all are. And so it's a deep thing, now that this world is born out, so to say, you have to grasp. The Antichrist is here, meaning the teachings is changing. So now Lilith is no longer the Redeemer. The Lamb's bride is no longer the Redeemer, but she's the harlot, the mystery of Babylon. And so the perspective is altered. And now Jesus and the Christ are one. And Jesus is just the name of this embryo or this world or egg cell after it's born out, and the name it's given. So the Old Testament is the conception to the birth. The New Testament is the birth. Revelations is the death of the body. The first spirit to fall, being Lucifer, and his rise or his redemption through that Christ, that egg cell, you know, which was, you know, a feminine thing. This is how you get the twin flames thing. And so it's a very deep thing I want you guys to grasp. This is how that happened. All being, this whole understanding is lost. The sperm is the spirit, the egg is the body. All bodies are worlds with the micro life in. And so this is why when y'all look for these things, y'all can't find them. Like Noah's Ark, truly being just the blastocyst. So you can look that up. Look up blastocyst. And this is when, you know, the sperm cell gets the egg cell, the two nucleus fuse, and then you get one zygote or one cell inside that egg cell. Then from there you get a whole bunch of cells inside that egg cell till it becomes too full. Then from there it kind of collapses, so to say. And so now you have cells making, you know, a rim around a small clump of cells. And so those small clump of cells is the ark floating, you know, in the waters, which would be the amniotic sac when it begins to fill up. And those outer cells become the placenta, the amniotic sac. And so as that, you know, as that blastocyst or embryoblast is now, you know, floating in the amniotic sac fluids, it begins to take shape and form into body. And, you know, the gut and skin cells begin to soak up the amniotic sac fluids. And so then the flood is over. This being, you know, Noah's Ark and the flood. And so those embryoblast cells that's, you know, kind of floating in that embryo to become, you know, the body, it is those cells that, you know, are raised up above, you know, becoming those brain cells. And so that's the children of Israel, you know, in their journey of the thalamus being brought up to its place. So it's a very deep thing you have to grasp. That's why it says, I forgot what text that is. I think in Jude, it says, the scepter will stay with Judah until Shelah arrives. Speaking of that, the body still being in its embryonic state, not fully formed yet, where the thalamus is now in its place. Until then, you know, the cerebrum cannot process any information, meaning you cannot walk, do anything. The spirit and the body are not, you know, in cohesion with one another until about the 30th week, 28th week. This is when that thalamus is formed in its spot. But it's formed at 8 weeks. But it's still in its primordial state. And so, you know, the Bible is explaining that. The cells of this body in that embryo state, in the building and making of this world, and the notochord being built up. This is the Tower of Babel. And the notochord is built up from the second layer, you can say, of the egg cell, because it's 3-layered, the egg cell. And so they build it up to the top part where the mouth would be, and then they disperse. And that's why it says, you know, their language was changed. But this all ties into, you know, that thalamus, you know, those two nucleus from the beginning, that gray matter, you know, being brought up now to its place. Like I said, it's formed at 4 weeks, but everything in the body is formed in the beginning. So everything you have is in that egg cell. It's just a matter of it being in its primordial state. And so around 30 weeks, 28 to 30 weeks, that thalamus is now set in place. And so now, you know, the throne seat is ready. In the Ark of the Covenant, Noah's Ark basically becomes the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant being the ventricles that lock down that gray matter. So this image isn't that crispy clear, but these are the ventricles. The ventricle system, you can look that up. and it locks down that gray matter. And the ventricle system goes all the way down the spine. They just changed the names in science. So as you get to the bottom of the spine, they begin to call it, you know, the sacrum. The sacral hiatus and the sacral cavern or something. But this is that ventricle system that I'm telling you of. But this is it in the brain. And the gray matter would be, you know, all in here. And this is a part of the ventricle system. It would be a plate there, busting the gray matter in half. And, you know, this is the throne, that ventricle system, locking it down. And that's the diencephalon area, and that's what it's speaking of. You know, it's very deep, you know. But I just wanted to show you guys that the Lamb's bride was that egg cell. And all in this book is talking about the comings into physical life and what it is. And you know, there's a deep meaning behind this all, you know. I'm trying to get you guys to grasp, you know. So it's a very deep thing. Hopefully you guys can start to tie the videos in together and broaden your understanding. Truly grasping the point of all these ancient texts and kind of unwrapping yourself from the religion, because you are this Jesus that you worship, meaning you are that sacrificial lamb that you read about. And it's very deep. But you can say, like I said, Lucifer and Jesus are one spirit, and so the Bible is speaking of that spirit's fall. This is why Lucifer was cast away before there was an earth. And then in the beginning, the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the deep. So that's him. You know, all was one. He rose himself above the rest, fell, and so now he's the only God, because he made that up when he said, I'm better than everybody else. And so it tells you the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the deep. That's why it doesn't say God, but the Spirit of. Because whoever he fell from, meaning ejaculation, so they was the same first too. Meaning when I ejaculated my son out, and so he's the Spirit of God that hovered over the face of the deep. He's the one that wanted to raise himself above me. Speaking of him as a brain cell at this time, before he fell down my spine into his mother's womb. So this is why it's referred to as the Spirit of God hovering over the waters. Because, you know, the Father did it first. It's like, so it's a deep thing, and you know. So when you read the Bible and you're like, yeah, my God created the whole world in the beginning. Well, your God is Lucifer. But it's not for you to judge. It's for you to understand redemption. So Lucifer fell and he was redeemed by that body. And when that body was burnt out, they called it Jesus. And so this is why Jesus was so smart and wise, because Lucifer was the wisest. And he made the greatest mistake. And so that just increased the wisdom even more. And so Jesus was wise as fuck. But that's just Lucifer in the body now. You know, because this is what happens when you fall to your death. That being ejaculated out. And then you get lucky sometimes if there's an exhale, then that's your Redeemer, the Christ. And so they named that body, or that Christ, Jesus. If you can kind of grasp. So the Christ is the egg cell, the body. This is a feminine thing. Lucifer and Jesus is just one spirit. Jesus is this spirit speaking to the cells within. You know, all worlds are bodies. And all bodies have the micro life within. You was a sperm cell, meaning you no different than the cells within the body that went into this body. You locked in it, and so you perceive the outer world, even though you are one with the inner, meaning you are no different than the cells within. You just a cell, locked down in the organism, the egg cell, the gift, the Christ. This is why they say, you know, keep the temple sacred, because it's a gift, lest you wouldn't be here. Y'all know. Sperm cells get ejaculated out every day with no egg cells there waiting. And this is all of our reality in life. So it's a very deep thing. You know, I don't want to ramble on. I just want you guys to soak this up. It's a very deep thing. In any event, hopefully I haven't disturbed anyone's spirit. Hopefully you guys are kind of grasping, you know, things a little better. Peace and wisdom.